Good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining. My name is Udbhav. I'm a fourth-year undergraduate student at McMaster University and an international visiting scholar at the University of Alabama at Birmingham. Today I'll be presenting my research on the dosimetric evaluation of Ethos 2.0 high fidelity mode, specifically in the context of single isocenter SRS. Now I know that's a bit of a mouthful, but we'll kind of get a better appreciation of what each of those things means as we go throughout the presentation. So specifically, let's look at Ethos 2.0 first of all. So Ethos is this massive sprawling ecosystem provided to us by our vendor, Varian Radiotherapy, and it's specifically geared towards something called adaptive radiotherapy. Now, none of this project has to do with adaptive radiotherapy, so we'll stick to looking at exactly what Ethos 2.0 promised to deliver. Ethos 2.0 was this massive software update that Varian has come out with in the last couple of years, and one of the hallmarks of this release has been something called high fidelity mode. Now, the developers tell us that high fidelity mode will decrease plan complexity and increase the amount of plans and the plan quality that we can generate that is very similar to something called SRS plans. And these or make a more SRS-like plan. And I might be asking, okay, well, what is SRS? For that, for a little bit of context, we'll go to figure one. We can see that the previous standard of care, so many, many years ago, if you had any sort of lesion in the brain, the answer was to just pump the entire brain with as much radiation as possible, whether it was healthy tissue or the tumor. Obviously, this wasn't great. Then we moved to something called hippocampal sparing, which is sparing these very sensitive areas of the brain, but still pumping the rest of the brain with quite a bit of radiation. Finally, we have here in figure C something called SRS, or stereotactic radiosurgery. Now, this specific treatment modality pumps as much radiation as it can into as small of an area as it can. So it's really confined to exactly where the tumor is. It's trying as much as it can not to irradiate any of the healthy brain tissue extraneously. And so when we talk about something being SRS-like, what we're really looking at is how well can we localize our radiation right onto the tumor and how well can we spare all of that healthy tissue right around it. Now, the way we used to do it in Ethos 1.0 was using something called control ring structures or ring structures. Now, these are non-anatomical, non-biologically derived structures that we call influencers, and those are effectively concentric rings around our tumor that will help push a lot of that dose right to the inside in terms of our planning software. Um, and so what we really wanted to evaluate was how does high fidelity mode, which promises to do much the same thing as rings did for us, and rings, which is our previous best approach, how do they combine together? Can you replace rings with high fidelity mode? Do they work even better in conjunction? This is kind of what we wanted to put numbers on and really try and evaluate. And so to do this, we took 45 brain metastasis patients that were previously treated here at UAB, not on the Ethos machine. Split them into 15 patients in our tuning cohort, 30 patients in our validation cohort. The 15 tuning patients really helped us to zone in on something we call templates. These templates are a list of priorities and objectives that allow us to generate these clinically acceptable plans. And once we had those plans, we then applied them directly onto the 30 validation cohort patients. And what we effectively evaluated on those patients were these four metrics here. So we have the PTV-V100, the brain V30 grade, the paddock conformity, and the fall-off index. And I'll explain what these are in a little bit more detail. So the PTV-V100, the primary tumor volume or the primary target volume, is everything that is cancer. So you can imagine that's a delineation of everything that's healthy on the outside and everything that's cancerous right on the inside. So we want to make sure that everything on the inside is getting as much radiation as we can, or at least 100% of the radiation that we want. And in this case, that's what we can see here. It's what we call coverage. And we can see that across the four plan types, there was no significant difference in the amount of coverage these PTVs were getting. Then we look at brain V30 gray, and this again, V30 grays are 100% of our dose that we want. And we want to make sure that as little of our healthy brain is actually receiving that dose. So this brain V30 gray is how much healthy brain tissue is receiving extraneous dose. So we want that to be as low as possible. We found that high fidelity on ring zone was significantly lower than any of the other plan types in this specific respect. Now we move to paddock conformity index, and that effectively tells us how well localized is our radiation to our specific tumor volume. And again, we want this to be as high as possible. We want to have as much radiation right on the tumor as possible and as little radiation outside of it as possible. And we can see high fidelity on ring zone, once again, is head and shoulders above the rest in that respect. Finally, fall-off index is pretty intuitive. It's how fast and how sharply does that dose fall off right outside of our target. And we want to make sure that that's as high as possible. We can see, once again, our high fidelity on rings on configuration provides significantly better fall-off compared to the others. And finally, we can take a look at this kind of pictorial, and we can see our figure A shows us our best plan versus figure D shows our worst plan with all of our metrics laid out. And we can see something called bridging in between these two structures. Now, that's something that high fidelity mode and rings did a really, really good job of preventing, and that's really what's manifested itself in the results you see up top. Now, in summary, this is the first reported comparison of Ethos 2.0 high fidelity mode in the context of SRS, specifically in the brain, and we found that there was a significant plan quality increase when we combine high fidelity mode with rings and even just high fidelity mode on its own. And with that, thank you very much for joining.